Good morning from Camp Taters. We are getting moving earlier than usual. It's about 6 o'clock so that we can get into town for the midday shuttle.
Actually, some of us have been up since 4:30 editing videos and drinking coffee. So we're pretty sure the other people that were on the ridge with us last night are down there. There is an alternate listed where you can basically go off trail and take a road all the way out. And it seems to be a thing on the CDT where all the comments are about, shortcutting, alternates, things like that. Anything but doing the actual red line. You don't want to do the actual red line. As you can see, our camp last night wasn't quite ideal, but I didn't feel like doing the last 3-some miles down to the trailhead in the dark and then setting up next to who knows who on a road. And hey, this is why backpacking really appeals to me, and specifically carrying all my gear, because then you can literally pretty much stop wherever you want. You know how some days things go really well, and then other days you're crouching over a cat hole and your dangling bits get bit by what sure as hell felt like a fire ant, and you're like, is this a good or a bad sign? Is the day only going to go up from here, or is this a sign of just how it's going to be?
Only up from there.
One would hope. I have more dangly bits that could be turned into fire ant nom nom. And Operation Taters Ditches Mat in Lima commences. So despite the fact we're basically right on the trail here, nobody passed us this morning, but I did already catch sight of at least 1 or 2 Novos going along the shortcut behind us. God, I love ridge walks. The weather forecast I pulled last night was claiming that we may end up with thunderstorms tonight. Would have been a far worse night tonight to be on the ridge. There is a certain amount of irony in the fact that when trail organizations talk about improving the trail, finishing the trail, it's always getting us off roads onto, actual dirt. And if they can't do that, dirt roads, ATV, etc., but single track being the ideal. And I know they're working towards that on the CDT, only to come out here and find that it seems like everybody who's leaving comments is just obsessed with where they can cut down to roads and where they can cut mileage off. And some of those same people have told me that the Florida Trail is horrible because it has road walks. But oh well, on the plus side, whenever things seem like they're a little too busy on trail, I know that next time there is a shortcut alternate, I will probably have the trail to myself. In this case, it's going to be the max end cutoff. I know there's a couple of people going around the long way, but at least amongst the people I've talked to, most of them seem to be doing the shortcut. Makes resupply easier. You can just stop along at max in. You don't have to hitch into West Yellowstone. Kind of feels like I'm being chased down the hill here by an Idaho storm. I will admit, part of the reason why we didn't do this last night, other than, it would have cost us a couple hours of sleep, is I did want to be able to enjoy this view on the way down. And at night, you get to see a little with the moon, but not the same. That is one of the reasons you don't see me night hiking a lot. Believe me, I've had friends comment I'm one of the people they believe should have been born with a headlamp on their forehead. I have done a ton of it in the Sierra, etc., etc. But, if I did that out on this ridgeline, for example, I get the miles, but I miss the views. Even on the PCT where I was having 100-degree heat waves, I had people trying to tell me, oh yeah, just switch to 100% night hiking, but I hiked in the morning, I hiked in the evening. There are basically as many ways to do these trails as there are people out here. Very few people seem to be doing the same approach, doing the same thing, doing the same trail in a lot of cases. I always say the reason behind the way I do the trail, aka the neurotic purist thing, is just because when I look back on what I did, I don't want to feel like I've got any, asterisks or regrets. Granted, this whole purist, red line, single season mindset is going to cause some problems if I continue on with the NST 11. So the National Scenic Trail 11 includes a bunch of stuff, most of which are doable. One involves a 400-mile road walk and 65 miles of trail, but The North Country Trail is an interesting one. It covers an area I haven't hiked. It looks really cool. Almost nobody does it. Those are all things that I really enjoy. But it's 4,000 miles. And as the name describes, it is up north. You know, it's up around the Great Lakes, etc. And the season there is really short. And I know people that can do sustained 40 miles a day. Obviously that ain't me with all the various issues. Okay-ish through hiker and all that. So I'm gonna have to see with that one. I was kind of torn between, well, do I even want to do it if I can't do it all in one season? Because I really do like that. There's something satisfying about, you know, starting at the Mexican border, getting to Canada, etc. Do I want to just divide it into two? Then I have to blow 2 years on it. And that would just be, you know, 2,000 mile hikes, which isn't bad. Funny how your standards change when you through hike, huh? If I do end up doing it though, I would want to do it, you know, clean and proper in my mind, meaning I don't want to take a whole bunch of shortcuts just in the name of trying to get to the other side and get a check mark on my resume. But hey, that's a problem for the future. That'll probably be at least a couple of years off. Nearer term priorities are going to be things like we may paddle the Mississippi next year because we can do that through Jen's summer. And then I can fit in some things like the Arizona Trail kind of around that, you know, just little 800 milers. I'm also intrigued by the Hayduke since that kind of syncs up with my peak bagging background as far as having a lot rougher terrain. And there's a lot of other little ones. For example, there are a number of shorter trails out east and in some of the other states. And I kind of like the idea of one summer just kind of heading out and stringing a bunch of those together and, you know, knock off like the New England Trail, the Long Trail, stuff like that. Ironically, even with this slightly more extreme lifestyle Jen and I have been doing for the last couple of years, we're still kind of plagued by the same problem. Not enough money, not enough time. If you had told me 5 years ago that in 5 years' time I would not be working and I would be, you know, well on my way through the Triple Crown and have done things like the Eastern Continental Trail, I would have said, no way, and that sounds like a dream. And probably that my knees wouldn't take it, but it works out. Speaking of my software engineering days of yore, I think I mentioned before that my last job went down in flames when the previous owners committed some not so minor fraud. Insert the Arrested Development joke here. I was signed on to a lawsuit against them / their insurance, etc. for about $10,000 worth of missing PTO, etc. And I just got the notice that that was resolved. I am getting $371 out of that. Whenever I find myself a bit nostalgic for the softer living days of, you know, having an apartment, going to work every day, having better coffee, etc., I just start telling Jen stories of what happened on my last couple of jobs, and all of a sudden she's like, oh my God, and I'm like, yeah, okay. However I end up here, even if it's in like debtor's prison, probably a happier outcome than, you know, continuing that. Though, of course, never say never. There is always the outcome that we end up in the hole too much due to unanticipated costs. And I'm forced to go back to regular employment. Though plan A is still to eventually work into seasonal dive work or other kind of outdoor work more in line with the volunteer stuff I was doing, you know, with all the money I was making in IT. Somebody chose rather poorly when it came to fence roulette here. And apparently Taters is leaving the trail a little bit early because she's on the wrong side of a fence. It doesn't look like. As she said, this fence has been crap for basically the entire border, and now that she needs to get across it, that's when it all of a sudden gets good. We call this the rusty vasectomy move. And sadly, it is road time. I guess about 6 today, and well, maybe 8 because we go along the road for 2 miles, and then the remainder on the other side. Anybody else really craving a hamburger right about now? And welcome back to the I-15. If you go left, it takes you up to Butte in like 80 miles, which apparently is what at least a couple of folks have been doing. We have about a 2 more mile walk down this frontage road to an underpass where we're going to meet a shuttle from the Lima motel at 11:30. I'm guessing that's the 9 a.m. shuttle drop-off. The glorious final mile of Taters on the CDT. An endless frontage road along the I-15. We ended up arriving at the pickup point about 40 minutes early and waiting about an hour with a mix of northbounders and one other southbounder. Lima is pretty much a little speck of a town with one RV park motel where we were staying and basically only one restaurant option. So you know how relationships have those sensitive issues? Look what Taters is wielding, somewhat threateningly. Tide Pod. If you didn't follow our Eastern Continental hike last year, we had a bit of an incident where Taters ended up inadvertently using 2 Tide Pods in laundry, and it was still in the clothing when we started hiking, and I ended up with some moderate chemical burns that plagued me for weeks. I'd been tempted to call it the Massitator Tide Pod Challenge. Taters, on the other hand, just didn't want me to put it in the video. And after another long section on her 3rd or 4th 29th birthday, we get into town, and the vegetarian option was a grilled cheese with a side of pickles. Yeah,
Salad?
Lima.
They had salad. It's been better than some towns we've been in.
They had a small bag of salad that they kind of dumped in there, and it was pretty wilted. The resupply is the Exxon, and as near as I can tell, the only redeeming value here is there are cell towers and there's a coffee place. So we're in a room. I have become a little cautious about people sending food packages just because there's been a small miscommunication or two that may have resulted in multiple days of having to eat moon pies as my primary food source. This was actually sent by Dennis, if you remember, from Virginia on the AT last year, and then also the guy who does the maps at the start of the video. And I have been super excited because in addition to all the yummy food things, I get back into a Hornet now. I seriously did not know they sold these in this country because the only place that we have ever had them was in Komodo. And they are super addictive and probably why I gained however many pounds while on that dive boat, but bang bangs. And how do we spend the last night on the trail? Pizza and wine. Here's Drunk Taters. Whoa,
Don't
this
put
is
this on YouTube.
This is going to be our most popular video yet.